You're lying on a quiet hillside somewhere near the Aegean coast, except it isn't really you. It's an older, dustier version of you the kind that hasn't seen a mattress in about 2.5 millennia. The air tastes like warm salt and crushed thyme, and you hear a goat making some deeply unconvincing attempts at sounding majestic. Above, the cicadas are screaming in unison, as though they all agreed to shout about taxes at the same time. This is ancient Greece. It's probably around for 50 BCE, though no one here would call it that. To them, it's just now. There's no concept of later centuries, no clocks ticking on your wrist, and number 2 a.m. Are you still watching? Prompt from your streaming service. You're just here. A local farmer named Mentis wanders past you, carrying an armful of figs that are technically not for sale but might mysteriously be available. If you compliment his sandals. Behind him, you hear the low murmur of the marketplacer, small collection of stalls made from patched linen where people exchange. Olives for gossip, and gossip for olives. Someone's shouting about freshly caught fish, but the smell already told you everything you needed to know. You wander toward a narrow street, stepping carefully over uneven stone slabs. The air grows thicker here, tinged with honey, smoke, and a faint hint of goat cheese that probably hasn't met a jar in weeks. A small boy races past you holding a tiny clay bowl, spilling something pale and sticky down his arm. The liquid smells sweet, almost like crushed almonds mixed with milk. You make a note of it without understanding yet how important it is. That's the thing about being here. You constantly bumping into small details that seem irrelevant until they aren't. Like this street, you'll come back to it. In this little city-state, rumors drift faster than the sea breeze. Today, the talk is about a goddess, one of those minor, easily overlooked immortals who never get the headline treatment. Her name is Hypnea, a little-known daughter of Nyx, goddess of the night. Hypnea isn't particularly famous because she didn't invent war strategies or heroic quests. She invented something far more controversial, the first bedtime snack. Apparently, one night, while the gods lounged around Mount Olympus pretending to like each other, Hypnea grew restless. The myths say she crept into Hera's kitchen, borrowed a few almonds, and mixed them with honey and goat's milk until she created a thick, creamy paste. Mortals called it melocratin, a sweet drink meant to soothe the body before sleep. You sip it now, hypothetically, and it's not bad. Not groundbreaking, but not bad. Kind of like oat milk before it went mainstream. Historians still debate whether Hypnea even existed or if she was a personification invented by bored storytellers. The records are hazy, which is fine, it's bedtime. You don't need sharp edges right now. What is clear, though, is that ancient Greeks believed nighttime nourishment helped you dream more vividly. Melocratin wasn't just a snack. It was a doorway. They thought honey carried fragments of divine sunlight and could smuggle small pieces of Olympus into your subconscious. This sounds poetic, until you realize they also thought putting onions under your pillow guaranteed prophetic dreams. You decide not to test that theory. The wind shifts, carrying laughter and the faint sound of a lyre from somewhere up the hill. Your eyelids feel heavier, but the day hasn't ended yet, not even close. In fact, you probably won't make it through this day. Before we drift further, take a moment. If you're enjoying this quiet little journey, Tap the like button gently, it won't wake the cicadas. And maybe subscribe so you can wander back here whenever you need rest. Oh, and one more thing. Drop a comment with your location and local time. It's oddly comforting to know where everyone else is drifting off from. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. The sun hasn't fully set yet, but the shadows stretch longer than you expect. Like someone quietly dimming the world's brightness setting. You wander down the same uneven street you crossed earlier, noticing how different it feels now. The smells sharpen, salted fish, figs split open by the heat, damp earth cooling beneath your sandals. You catch a fragment of someone singing a low, melodic line about heroes and their inevitable mistakes. It fits the mood perfectly. Somewhere, behind you, a group of women laugh softly while kneading dough in a shallow clay basin. There, making placas, a flat cake sweetened with sesame and honey. It's a favorite offering to Hypnea, who, according to rumor, rewards those who honor her with nights of uninterrupted sleep. Whether that's true or just a clever marketing campaign by early bakers, no one can say. You lean closer to watch the process, and one of the women notices. She presses a lump of dough into your palm without asking, like she's seen you before, and somehow knows you belong here. It's warm, sticky, soft around the edges. You roll it gently, but your modern sensibilities protest you're not used to touching food before it's sanitized. Packaged and hashtagged. You set the dough back carefully, pretending you've always known how to behave in the 5th century BCE. The streets here slope toward a small sanctuary, a shaded courtyard surrounded by cracked columns. At its center stands a modest stone altar dedicated to Hypnea herself. Tiny terracotta bowls lie scattered around it, each filled with offerings, almonds, sesame cakes, fig slices dripping honey. A small child places a single olive on the altar, his expression solemn, as though Hypnea herself is watching from somewhere just beyond the horizon, and maybe she is. One myth claims Hypnea wandered through dreams, collecting discarded thoughts the way fishermen collect driftwood. Supposedly, she used them to weave invisible nets that could catch stray memories and keep them from vanishing when you woke. A poetic idea. Though some scholars insist the story was invented centuries later, probably by someone trying to sell extra figs. Still, you can't help but feel at the weight of collective belief lingering in this sanctuary. Humming softly beneath the stones, people here don't question whether the gods exist. They question whether the gods are listening. As night deepens, the city slows. You find yourself drawn to a gathering just beyond the courtyard, a loose circle of townsfolk seated around a low fire, sharing melicraton from simple clay cups. One older man gestures wildly as he tells a story about Zeus turning into a swan, while the others nod like they've heard this ridiculous plot twist 100 times. Someone adds, "Again, does he ever just stay himself?" They all laugh, soft and knowing. A woman beside you hands you a cup of melicraton without asking. You sip carefully, this time letting the honeyed milk coat your throat. It's rich but calming, sweet without being sharp. Around you, voices blur into a single, low current of sound, the perfect lullaby. You overhear another strange tidbit, apparently. Some locals believe that if you whisper Hypnea's name 3 times while holding a fig leaf, you'll dream of the person you secretly desire. No one agrees on where this belief came from, but several people around the fire glance meaningfully at each other when it's mentioned. You file that away for later, though you're not sure how useful it'll be. The stars crawl higher overhead, one by one, sharp and impossibly close. The night breeze finally cools the day's heat, carrying with it a soft rattle from distant olive trees. It feels as though the entire city has exhaled. Still, there's something faintly unsettling about the quiet, like the pause between two verses of a song. Maybe it's just the exhaustion catching up to you, or maybe it's the lingering sense that Hypnea isn't just a story. You remember the small boy from earlier, running with his bowl of melocraton, sticky fingers trailing behind him. That same pale drink now rests in your hand. And somehow, without meaning to, you've stepped directly into her myth. The fire crackles softly. Your eyelids grow heavier. For a moment, you let yourself lean back against the cool stone, listening to the rhythmic chorus of cicadas, distant waves, and voices slipping into song. Somewhere behind it all, you think you hear a laugh light, distant, almost hidden, but it fades before you can place it. You wake to the soft scrape of sandals on stone and the quiet murmur of voices. The fire from last night has burned down to embers, sending thin curls of smoke into the pre-dawn air. The sanctuary courtyard is nearly empty now, just a few figures moving in and out of the shadows, placing fresh offerings on the altar before disappearing into side streets that still feel half asleep. The first thing you notice is the silence, a layered kind that seems to rest on top of itself. Somewhere beyond the city walls, waves slap lazily against the rocky shore, but here, within these narrow streets, the air feels contained, as though it's holding its breath. You stand slowly, brushing fine dust from your tunic. Somehow it feels natural to think of it as your tunic now. The clay cup from last night sits nearby, faintly sticky from dried honey. You set it down carefully, not wanting to anger whatever spirits claim ownership of unwashed dishes around here. A young priestess in a pale linen chiton sweeps past you, carrying a small tray of figs and almonds balanced precariously in one hand. Her other hand clutches a rolled-up scrap of papyrus, and as she passes, you catch fragments of a hymn murmured under her breath. It's a chant for Hypnea, soft and deliberate, inviting her presence into the dreams of those who seek her. She notices you watching and pauses just long enough to whisper, "Don't look directly at the altar at sunrise." She doesn't like it. Then she vanishes down the corridor before you can ask any questions, perfectly reassuring. Your stomach growls quietly, betraying modern expectations of breakfast buffets that haven't been invented yet. Here, the morning meal is simple: a handful of olives, some barley bread, maybe a smear of goat cheese if the gods are feeling generous. You spot a small stall tucked into a shaded corner, its clay jars brimming with pale, fragrant melocraton. The vendor, a wiry man with sun-browned skin, gestures lazily toward you as if he already knows you'll buy some. You hand over a few obelsteini, worn coins warm from your palmand, receive a shallow cup of the sweet drink. This batch tastes slightly different, heavier on the almonds, and you wonder if the recipe changes depending on who stirs it. Or maybe it changes depending on who drinks it. A tall, quiet man at the stall leans in just enough to speak without turning his head. "Careful," he says, his voice low and even. The more you drink, the more she notices. You don't ask who he means. You already know. Down the street, a small crowd gathers beneath a shaded awning where a traveling storyteller has set up shop. He's thin, sharp-featured, his hands constantly in motion as he spins tailies designed to pull passers-by closer. You join the cluster, slipping into the edge of the circle where it is easier to disappear into the anonymity of the crowd. Once, he says, Hypnea walked among mortals, searching for a dream so perfect it could never be forgotten. But she found only fragments half-formed wishes, broken thoughts, fading faces. He pauses, letting the tension stretch. So she began weaving her own dreams and gifting them to those who pleased her. But at a price. The crowd leans in. You do too, though you don't mean to. They say the first man who tasted her gift slept for 9 days straight, the storyteller whispers. When he woke, he remembered nothing, not his name, not his home, not even his own children. He leans back suddenly, grinning. But at least he was well rested. A ripple of soft laughter moves through the listeners, though no one seems entirely convinced it's a joke. After the crowd disperses, you linger, watching the storyteller carefully. He meets your gaze briefly, his expression unreadable, then packs up his small wooden box of props and leaves without another word. You wander again, tracing familiar streets now glowing with soft morning light. The market stirs to life slowly, vendors arranging figs in neat pyramids, children sweeping dust from stalls that will be dusty again in an hour, fishermen hauling baskets of silver-scaled catch from the shore. Somewhere nearby, someone plays a low, meandering tune on a double flute, its sound weaving in and out of the waking city like a thread. Then, without realizing it, your steps carry you back to the narrow street, from yesterday the one with uneven stones and almond-sweet air. There's something about this place, a quiet pull you can't explain. The same small boy runs past again, bowl in hand, spilling droplets of pale melocratin down his arm just as before. You blink. For a moment, it feels like time has doubled back on itself. You're not sure if you should follow him, but you do. The boy leads you through twisting alleys where sunlight filters in thin, fractured beams glinting off pots of olive oil and clay jars stacked precariously against walls. You stay several steps behind, pretending you know exactly where you're going, until he darts around a corner and vanishes into a shaded courtyard you've never seen before. This space is different, quieter. A small pool of water sits at its center, so still it reflects the sky like polished bronze. Around it, low stone benches circle beneath an arching fig tree, its leaves stirring faintly in the morning breeze. The air smells cooler Hierothea, sweeter. The boy crouches near the pool's edge, dipping his sticky fingers into the water and swishing them clean. Without looking up, he says, "You shouldn't drink too much." You start to ask what he means, but he interrupts. It makes the dreams louder. He finally glances at you, and for the first time, you notice his eyes are an unusual shade pale, almost silvery, reflecting the faint ripple of the pool. Before you can respond, he darts off again, vanishing between two narrow stone passages as if the city swallowed him whole. You're left alone in the courtyard. On the opposite bench, someone has left a half-finished clay tablet covered in faint scratches. You lean closer and see fragments of a hymn carved into it, a prayer to Hypnea, asking her to guide the mind gently and fold the soul in soft shadow. The words are delicate, almost tender, like they were whispered rather than written. Behind you, a soft voice says, She listens more closely here. You turn to see an elderly woman sitting beneath the fig tree, her hair pinned loosely with bits of polished bone. She's grinding something in a shallow mortar, almonds, honey, and a pinch of crushed herbs you don't recognize. Her hands move slowly, deliberately, and the faint smell rising from the mixture is oddly soothing. She walks between waking and sleeping, the woman murmurs. That's why the mellicratin matters. It carries you closer to her if you drink it with intention. You ask, what happens if you drink it without intention? The woman stops grinding, tilts her head, and smiles faintly. Then she chooses for you. That's comforting. You sit beside the pool, letting the sunlight catch the ripples where the boy's fingers disturbed the surface. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the faint hum of bees drifting lazily among the fig blossoms, their sound blending with the low hush of the wind. It's all so gentle, so quiet, you almost miss the soft tapping of footsteps entering the courtyard behind you. A young man carrying a basket of small clay cups approaches the elderly woman. He whispers something you can't hear, and she nods once before tucking a sprig of mint into the mortar and mixing it in with practiced precision. You realize she's preparing a different version of mellicratin, one spiced and herbal, probably meant for the night ahead. Tonight, she says softly, without looking up, there will be a gathering at the sanctuary. Hypnia's name will be spoken, and the dreams will be shared. She glances at you briefly. You should come. If she notices you already, there's no point in hiding. You want to ask how she knows she's noticed you, but the words stick in your throat. Instead, you nod, as though accepting an invitation you don't fully understand. By the time you leave the courtyard, the city is fully awake. Merchants call out from stalls. Children chase each other through dusty lanes, and the sky overhead hums with heat. But beneath the noise, you carry a growing awareness, something unseen, threading you deeper into Hypnia's story. Remember the street you walked past earlier? It's back. But now, instead of honey and almonds, you smell smoke curling faintly from the sanctuary's direction. Something's waiting there tonight. By the time dusk settles over the city, the sanctuary courtyard glows faintly in the fading light. Oil lamps flicker in small alcoves carved into the stone walls, their flames bending and reshaping shadows as though the space itself is breathing. The air is warmer than you expected, rich with honey, resin, and the faint tang of burning myrtle leaves. You're not the only one drawn here. A small crowd has gathered, speaking in hushed tones. Clay cups pass from hand to hand, filled with freshly prepared mellicratin, the herbal blend you saw earlier, spiced and faintly bitter beneath its sweetness. The elderly woman from the fig tree courtyard is here, seated near the altar, her mortar resting at her side. She meets your eyes briefly, but says nothing, as if words would shatter something fragile hanging between you. At the center of the sanctuary, priests move in practiced silence, placing bowls of almonds, honeycombs, and fig slices at the base of Hypnia's modest stone idol. She's depicted differently here than in other places you've seen, a tall, veiled figure with closed eyes, hands extended as though offering sleep itself. The statue is unpolished and rough around the edges, almost deliberately unfinished, as if inviting the worshipper's dreams to complete it. A priest steps forward and raises his hand. His voice carries softly, rhythmic and careful, inviting everyone to close their eyes and breathe deeply. You obey. letting the quiet settle around you like a second skin. He begins reciting an invocation to Hypnea, daughter of night, weaver of forgotten paths. Guide our minds through gentle currents. Carry us where shadow softens into silence. The chant repeats in low, layered voices until the air seems to vibrate faintly. A breeze stirs despite the stillness of the night, carrying with it the faint smell of crushed fig leaves. Somewhere behind you, someone begins playing a slow, wandering melody on a lyre. You sip from your clay cup, expecting the same honeyed warmth as before, but this blend is different, cooler, subtler. The almond flavor gives way to mint, and something faintly floral you can't name. It leaves a faint tingling at the back of your throat, a soft heat that spreads slowly through your chest. The priest speaks again. Tonight, Hypnea walks the quiet paths. We drink so she may see us. We dream so she may remember us. You glance around. Everyone else's faces are half-lit, half-shadowed, their expressions distant, like they're already halfway to sleep. You wonder if you look the same. A strange detail catches your eye. Small clay bowls filled not with offerings, but with smooth, polished stones, each etched with delicate spiral patterns. A priestess picks one up, whispers something into it, and places it back into the bowl. The elderly woman notices you watching and leans closer without turning her head. They're called memory stones, she whispers. They trap fragments of dreams. If you wake holding one, you keep what you've seen. You wonder, silently, how many dreams are stored here, hidden beneath ordinary stone. You also wonder how many weren't meant to be remembered. As the night deepens, the chanting slows, drifting into silence, broken only by the faint hum of cicadas beyond the sanctuary walls. The crowd remains still, sipping slowly, breathing softly, almost synchronized. And then you feel it a shift, subtle but unmistakable. The air grows heavier, warmer. The shadows along the walls seem deeper, like ink soaking into fabric. Somewhere nearby, a breeze passes over your skin, though the lamps don't flicker. You glance up at Hypnea's statue, expecting the same veiled stillness as before. But in the shifting lamplight, the folds of stone seem almost to move. It's just a trick of shadows, you tell yourself, probably. Historians still debate whether these rituals were meant to induce actual visions or simply provide psychological comfort. But standing here, you feel something beyond comfort humming faintly in your chest. Somewhere behind you, the boy from the courtyard laughs quietly, soft and breathless, and then vanishes into the sound of the lyre. The sanctuary empties slowly, the crowd dissolving into winding streets and silent courtyards. You remain seated on the edge of the stone bench, your empty clay cup warm against your palms. The air outside feels cooler now, sharp enough to bring you halfway back to yourself, but not completely. The elderly woman approaches, her mortar tucked under her arm. She moves with the deliberate slowness of someone who knows time bends around her anyway. You stayed, she says, more observation than question. You nod. That's good, she murmurs, though her expression doesn't suggest comfort. The first night is the easiest. The dreams haven't noticed you yet. That's less good. She hands you a small polished stone etched with spirals, like the ones you saw near the altar. Keep this under your head tonight, she says. If she comes to you, don't speak her name. Not yet. Before you can ask what happens if you do, she disappears into the shadowed street, her pale figure swallowed by the winding alleys. You make your way back toward the room where you've been sleeping if you can call lying on a reed mat beside a clay oil lamp sleeping. The night air carries layered scents, warm earth, fig sap, faint smoke from olive wood fires, and somewhere in the distance, the salt of the sea. Inside, the reed mat creaks softly beneath your weight. You set the memory stone beside you, just in case. The clay lamp flickers, throwing restless shadows across the plastered wall. Outside, the city hums faintly, as though still breathing, even in its sleep. You close your eyes. At first, nothing happens, just darkness, soft and weightless. Then, faint images drift across your mind, half-formed and blurred, like wet paint smeared by careless fingers. A sliver of shoreline, a hand scattering almonds into water, a flicker of a veiled figure whose shadow stretches longer than her body. You open your eyes briefly, startled, but the room remains quiet. The oil lamp burns low. When you close your eyes again, the dream pulls you deeper. Now you're standing in the sanctuary courtyard, though it's emptier than before. The stone benches crumbling, the altar cracked and overgrown with ivy. A faint mist curls around the edges of the pool, and the fig tree trembles though there's no wind. You step closer to the statue of Hypnea, only to find it's no longer, stone its unfinished clay, damp beneath your fingers. Somewhere, faintly, you hear the sound of water dripping, steady and measured, like footsteps just out of sight. Then, behind you, a voice, soft, deliberate, unmistakable. You've drunk too much. You turn, expecting the elderly woman, but it's the boy, the same silvery-eyed boy from the courtyard. He steps closer, holding his empty bowl, melocratin dripping down his arm exactly as before. But this time, the liquid glows faintly in the dim light, pulsing softly with each drop. She knows you now, he whispers. You'll have to decide. Before you can ask what he means, you wake. The room is quiet. The oil lamp has burned out completely, leaving only a thin wisp of smoke curling upward. Beside you, the memory stone feels warm in your palm, though you don't remember reaching for it. Somewhere outside, faintly, a lyre plays the same wandering tune from the sanctuary, and you realize, slowly, that tonight was only the beginning. Morning drifts in slowly, as though the sun itself hesitated before committing to the day. Pale light spills across the reed mat, soft and muted, catching motes of dust that hover lazily in the still air. Outside, the city is already stirring, vendors shouting, children darting through alleys, and the faint, rhythmic clatter of pottery lids sealing jars of honey and almonds. You sit up carefully, half expecting the memory stone to feel cool again, but when you pick it up, warmth lingers beneath your fingertips. The spiral etched into its surface seems sharper than you remember, though you decide that's probably just your imagination, probably somewhere outside. A low, uneven drumming begins the sound of traders unloading amphorae from wooden carts. You follow the sound into the street, blinking against the sunlight. The familiar, uneven stones stretch ahead, carrying you back into the city's waking pulse. Today feels different, though. People move more slowly, speaking in lowered voices as if they, too, sense something they can't name. Near the sanctuary gates, small knots of worshippers stand together, comparing dreams from last night. You catch fragments. She walked past me. I saw the fig tree growing upside down. My brother says I was humming in my sleep. A bearded man clutching a clay cup, mutters, "Never drink two in one night." No one asks him to explain. The elderly woman from before appears suddenly, emerging from the shadow of a tall column like she'd been standing there for centuries. Her mortar is gone, replaced by a thin wooden staff carved with small spirals near the handle. "You kept the stone," she says softly, her gaze scanning your palm before you can hide it. You nod. "Good," she murmurs, though her expression tightens. "It means you remembered. That's the first step." You want to ask what the second step is, but she's already walking away, swallowed by the drifting crowd near the sanctuary gates. Before you can follow, a merchant calls out to you from a shaded stall lined with baskets of figs and earthen jars of pale, sweet paste. He grins like he knows a secret and gestures for you to come closer. "You look like someone who needs Hypnia's blessing," he says, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Special preparation. Almonds ground at midnight, honey stirred counterclockwise." You raise an eyebrow. He leans closer, whispering, "It's stronger." Against your better judgment, you take the small clay cup he offers. The melocraton inside glows faintly in the light, thicker than usual, smelling faintly of crushed herbs and warm resin. You sip slowly, half expecting dizziness. But instead there's a clarity to it, like the air sharpens around you for just a moment before settling again. The merchant watches your face carefully, then nods once, satisfied. "Tonight," he says, "she come closer." You set the empty cup down carefully, your pulse a little too fast for comfort. As the day drags on, the city grows hotter, and the white stone streets reflect the light, so fiercely you find yourself ducking into shaded alleys just to breathe. Somewhere, a lyre plays that same wandering melody you've heard more than once now, winding in and out of the background like a thread stitching the hours together. You pass a small group of children sitting cross-legged near a fountain, folding fig leaves into tiny boat shapes and floating them across the water. One girl points at you without speaking, then whispers something to the boy beside her. They both giggle softly, their eyes following you as you walk away. By dusk, the air thickens with anticipation. Small oil lamps begin appearing in doorways and windows, each casting a narrow ring of gold into the gathering dark. Somewhere beyond the sanctuary walls, you hear low chanting slower, deeper than last night, almost like a heartbeat beneath the hum of cicadas. When you reach the courtyard, the boy with silvery eyes is there again, sitting cross-legged on the bench beneath the fig tree. He dips a finger into a clay bowl of melocraton and traces a spiral onto the stone seat beside him. "She's watching tonight," he says without looking up. "You should be ready." You ask how. He smiles faintly, wiping the glowing spiral away with the palm of his hand. "You'll see." Night folds itself gently over the city like soft linen, muting the streets into a hush that feels deliberate, almost ritualistic. Oil lamps scatter their fragile light across the sanctuary courtyard. There, flickering halos blurring the edges of benches and columns. The fig tree rustles faintly, though the air is still. Tonight's gathering is smaller but heavier, somehow. The same priests from before prepare offerings. But there's a new precision to their movements measured. Careful, like dancers keeping time to a rhythm only they can hear. You settle near the pool at the center of the courtyard, the memory stone resting cool in your palm this time. Its spiral catches the lamplight, glowing faintly for a moment before slipping back into shadow. The elderly woman sits across from you beneath the fig tree, her staff resting against her knee. When your gaze meets hers, she nods slightly as though acknowledging something unspoken. The first hymn begins. It's lower than before, more resonant, the melody winding through the courtyard like smoke. The words aren't meant for mortals to understand entirely, but fragments slip through. Daughter of night, keeper of forgotten names. Fold us into silence. You sip the melocraton offered to you, this time prepared with mint and something floral, softer and colder on the tongue. It carries heat into your chest, a slow bloom that spreads outward like ripples in still water. Somewhere, behind you, a man hums faintly out of sync with the hymn. The priest pauses mid-chant to glare at him. You suppress a laugh, because apparently even divine rituals can't escape that one person who doesn't know the lyrics. Then the courtyard quiets. The lamps flicker once, twice, then steady again, their flames stretching taller, as though drawn upward by something unseen. You feel the shift not dramatic, but unmistakable the way the air subtly deepens. Heavier, somehow, pressing gently against your skin. A voice enters the hymn, soft and layered, but it's coming from nowhere you can see. It threads through the chants seamlessly, as though it's always been there, guiding them forward. You glance at the priests, but their mouths are closed. The boy with silvery eyes leans against the fig tree, watching you. He tilts his head slightly, as if to say, "Listen." And so you do. The voice isn't speaking in words exactly, but you feel the meaning settle behind your ribs, an invitation, soft and inevitable. Your breathing slows without your consent. Somewhere nearby, someone drops a clay cup, and it hits the stone floor without sound. The priests raise their hands. The hymn ends. Silence stretches like pulled thread, fine and fragile. Then a gust of wind curls through the courtyard, stirring fig leaves, rattling the tiny bowls on the altar. The lamps dim almost to nothing before flaring bright again, and in that brief darkness, you think you see her, a veiled figure standing at the edge of the pool, her reflection sharper than her form. But when you blink, she's gone. The elderly woman rises, her staff tapping softly against the stone. She's closer now, she whispers. The dreams will deepen. Hold the stone tonight. You nod, though your hand already tightens around it instinctively. As you leave the sanctuary, the boy's voice follows you, quiet and certain. She remembers you. You don't ask how he knows. You're not sure you want to know. Sleep doesn't come easily tonight. The reed mat beneath you feels thinner than usual, the oil lamp's faint glow to sharp at the edges. Outside, the city hums faintly, the occasional creak of wooden carts, distant barking. The low murmur of voices slipping through open windows, but none of it lulls you the way it used to. The memory stone rests in your palm, cool and smooth, its spiral edges catching traces of lamplight. You run your thumb across its grooves without meaning to, feeling their rhythm almost like breathing. At some point, you close your eyes. At first, the darkness is ordinary, but then, slowly, sound drifts into it, the faint ripple of water against stone, the soft tapping of bare feet somewhere nearby. A pale glow gathers in the distance, almost liquid in the way it spreads, until you realize you're standing in the sanctuary courtyard again. Except it isn't quite the same. The altar is cracked and overgrown, its offerings scattered into pools of melted wax. The fig tree stretches taller here, its roots twisting deep into the stone floor, drinking something from beneath the surface. Lamps hang suspended in midair, their flames frozen like captured lightning. And, behind you, the city is silent eerily, impossibly silent. A single bowl of melocratin rests on the edge of the pool. Its pale surface reflects the light strangely, rippling though the air around it is still. You glance down and realize you're holding a second bowl, though you don't remember receiving it. The boy is here again, sitting cross-legged beneath the fig tree. He's older, somehow not in his face, but in the way he holds himself, like someone who's walked too far and seen too much. "She's waiting," he says softly, pointing toward the pool. "If you drink here, you'll see her. You ask what happens if you don't." He shrugs. "Then she come to you anyway. But she decide what you see." You weigh your options carefully until a ripple breaks across the pool's surface. Slow and deliberate, though nothing touched it. The boy watches you closely, his silvery eyes catching faint light. "This is where she gathers the pieces," he whispers. "The thoughts people leave behind when they wake." You glance at the altar where small shapes begin to appear, fragments of clay tablets, etched with dream words you can't fully read, half-sentences, broken names, blurred symbols. One slips into the pool, vanishing beneath the surface like ink, dissolving into water. A soft voice rises from somewhere unseen, low and melodic, carrying words you don't quite understand, but somehow feel. "Lay down the waking, follow the shadow." Your hand tightens on the memory stone. Its spiral feels warmer now, faintly pulsing beneath your fingers. You set the untouched bowl beside the pool. The boy tilts his head, studying you for a long moment, then smiles faintly, like he knows a joke you don't yet understand. "Careful," he says quietly. "Once she remembers you, it's harder to leave." Before you can answer, the light fractures the lamps burst softly into nothing. The fig leaves scatter upward instead of down, and you fall backward into darkness that feels almost soft. You wake to silence. The reed mat creaks beneath you. The oil lamp has gone out, but the memory stone in your palm is warm again, and this time faint traces of honey stick to your fingertips. The next morning feels muted, as though the city itself hasn't fully woken. The sun hangs low and pale, struggling to push through thin clouds drifting lazily above the rooftops. Somewhere, nearby, a rooster crows half-heartedly, as though reconsidering its life choices. You step outside, the stone street cool beneath your feet, and notice small groups of people clustered near the sanctuary gates. Their faces are drawn, their movements slow, like they're carrying something heavy they can't name. You hear fragments of quiet conversation. "I dreamed of the fig tree again. She was near the pool. I woke holding a stone, but it wasn't mine." The elderly woman stands among them, her staff grounded lightly against the stone floor, her gaze scanning the gathering with an expression that seems equal parts patience and warning. When her eyes meet yours, she gestures for you to approach. "You saw her," she says softly, not asking but stating. You nod. "She doesn't appear to everyone," the woman murmurs. "That means she's marked you." You ask what that means, but she only studies you for a moment before answering with unsettling calm. "It means you carry part of her now." Before you can process that, a nearby priest interrupts, holding a small clay jar cradled carefully in both hands. The jar is filled with pale liquid, thicker than the melocratin you've tasted before. He offers it to the woman, who dips a finger inside and traces a spiral across the stone at her feet. "It's happening faster this season," she says under her breath, though you're not sure if she's speaking to you or to herself. She notices your hesitation and sighs. Don't drink again today. Let her linger outside your dreams, or she pull you under too soon. For the rest of the day, the marketplace feels uncanny, like an echo of itself. Vendors call out the same phrases you've heard every morning, but their voices sound oddly muted, muffled at the edges. Children still dart through the streets, folding fig leaves into boats. But now the boats drift strangely against the current of the fountain water, spinning backward as if refusing to leave. You catch yourself glancing over your shoulder more often than usual, searching for the boy with silvery eyes, but he's nowhere to be seen. By midday, the heat pushes you into the shaded courtyard of a small taverna, where merchants whisper about last night's gathering. One claims he saw Hypnea step from the pool and scatter almonds across the stone floor. Another insists she speaks directly to children, leaving adults deaf to her voice. Historians still debate whether Hypnea worship was ever widespread or confined to isolated cults, but standing here, sipping watered wine beneath rustling fig leaves, it doesn't feel theoretical at all. As evening comes, you hear it again, the wandering melody of a lyre, faint and deliberate, threading through the narrow alleys. You follow the sound instinctively, though you can't quite explain why. It leads you back to the sanctuary gates. The boy is there, leaning casually against a cracked column, his empty bowl dangling from one hand. "She asked for you," he says without preamble, his voice carrying strangely in the warm air. You ask what she wants. He smiles faintly, stepping backward into the shadows of the courtyard. "Come tonight," he says, "she show you." And then he's gone, leaving only the sound of the lyre behind him, fading slowly into silence. Night comes sooner than you expect, slipping between the streets like a slow-moving tide. The sanctuary courtyard waits, quiet and deliberate, lit by fewer lamps than before. There, glow soft and steady, pooling around the altar like liquid gold. You hesitate at the threshold, feeling the weight of expectation press faintly against your shoulders. The memory stone rests in your palm, heavier somehow, its spiral edges sharper than they were this morning. The elderly woman is here again, seated beneath the fig tree, her staff balanced across her knees. She gestures for you to join her without speaking. When you sit, she leans closer, her voice low, almost lost beneath the hum of cicadas. She walks more freely now, she whispers. The distance between waking and dreaming is thinner tonight. Stay close to the stone. You nod, though your grip has already tightened around it instinctively. Across the courtyard, the priests arrange new offerings on the altar, honeycomb glistening beneath lamplight. Bowls of almonds ground into pale paste, figs split open and glistening in the warm air. The scent is thick and sweet, almost dizzying. Tonight's melocraton is different, again infused with saffron and crushed mint, its color deeper, closer to amber than milk. You're offered a clay cup, but hesitate before drinking, remembering the woman's warning. The boy with silvery eyes appears near the pool, barefoot and silent, carrying his empty bowl as always. He sits cross-legged, tracing spirals into the dust with his fingertip, erasing each one before completing it. "She's already here," he murmurs without looking up. You glance instinctively toward the altar, but nothing's changed. The veiled statue remains motionless, the offerings untouched, the lamps steady. And yet, the air feels heavier, layered somehow, as if sound itself moves slower. The hymn begins. Tonight's song is lower than before, humming softly in the base of your chest, pulling your breath into its rhythm without asking permission. Words coil around you, half familiar by now. Fold the waking, open the shadow. Carry us softly into her silence. Your eyelids feel heavier with each verse, your breathing slowing until the edges of the courtyard blur slightly. Then the boy speaks again, his voice quiet but clear enough to cut through the chanting. Don't close your eyes yet. You obey, keeping your gaze fixed on the shallow pool at the courtyard's center. Its surface ripples faintly despite the air being perfectly still. Slowly, impossibly, the reflections in the water begin to shift, not distorted, but replaced entirely. You see things that aren't here. A shoreline under silver light, waves retreating soundlessly. A hand scattering almonds into dark water. A veiled figure standing at the edge of an unseen forest, motionless and waiting. She's showing you where she keeps them, the boy says softly. You ask, keeps what? He meets your eyes, and for the first time, you notice there's no reflection in his pupils. Dreams, he whispers, the ones people leave behind. The priests chant louder now, but their voices sound distant, like they're calling from somewhere underwater. The pool darkens, swallowing the reflected images until only your own face remains faintly visible. Somewhere, behind you, a clay bowl slips from someone's hand and shatters. But the sound stretches unnaturally long, slow and deliberate, as though time itself has taken a breath. Then the hymn stops, and for a moment, the courtyard is perfectly, impossibly still. She's closer, the boy whispers. Don't move. A gust of wind rises from nowhere, curling fig leaves across the stone floor. The lamps flicker once, twice, and for just a heartbeat. You see her standing by the altar veiled, silent, hands extended like she's offering something unseen. When you blink, she's gone. You return to the reed mat late, though calling it returning feels inaccurate. The streets seem unfamiliar tonight, the alleys stretching longer than they should, shadows bending into shapes you can't quite place. By the time you reach your room, the oil lamp on the small wooden table is already burning, though you don't remember lighting it. The memory stone sits where you left it, its spiral edges glowing faintly in the lamplight, as though warmed from within. You lie down, the stone cradled carefully in your palm, and close your eyes. Sleep comes quickly this time. When you open them again, you're standing at the edge of a shoreline beneath an endless indigo sky. Waves crawl up the sand without sound, retreating so slowly it feels unnatural, like time has been loosened from its ordinary pace. The air smells faintly of almonds and honey. A trail of small clay bowls leads inland, each filled with pale, liquid glowing faintly in the starlight. You follow them. The path wends between fig trees whose roots coil deep into shifting soil. Every few steps, you pass stone fragments etched with spirals, half buried as though abandoned long ago. Somewhere, behind you, a soft humming begins a familiar wandering melody, played on a lyre you can't see. Then you reach it, a pool identical to the one in the sanctuary courtyard, except larger. Its edges lined with carved stones so worn they've nearly lost their markings. The water is perfectly still, reflecting the stars above with impossible clarity. The boy is here again, seated on the opposite bank, his empty bowl resting in his lap. His voice carries easily across the water, quiet, but sharp enough to slice through the silence. She keeps them here, he says simply. You kneel at the edge of the pool, peering into its surface. At first, you see only your reflection, but then images bloom beneath it. Layered, faintly over one another, a woman kneeling beneath a fig tree, carving symbols into soft clay. A fisherman whispering to a bowl of melicraton before setting it adrift on the tide. A child weaving almond leaves into thin braids, placing them carefully beneath a reed mat. They're all pieces, the boy murmurs, fragments of dreams she collects. You reach toward the surface, but he shakes his head quickly. Not yet. A soft ripple distorts the reflections, and then you see her. Hypnia stands at the far edge of the pool, veiled as always. Her silhouette blurred, as though the air itself refuses to hold her shape. Her hands are cupped around something you can't see, though faint light spills between her fingers. You ask what she's holding, but the boy only tilts his head, watching her carefully. She decides who remembers, he whispers, and who forgets. The veiled figure lowers her hands slowly, the light dimming, folding back into her palms until it disappears completely. You blink and wake, abruptly, to the creak of a wooden cart passing outside your window. The oil lamp is still burning softly. The memory stone in your hand is warm again. But this time, faint traces of wet fig sap cling to your fingertips, and you're starting to realize she's no longer staying in the dreams. Morning arrives reluctantly, pulling its pale light over the city like a blanket someone isn't quite ready to use. The air carries a faint sweetness today, the scent of figs crushed under sandals mixed with the distant salt of the sea. People move slower than usual, like they've all woken from dreams they can't quite remember. The marketplace is already alive by the time you step outside, though it feels different somehow, softer at the edges. Traders unfurl bolts of fabric in muted colors. Bees drift lazily around jars of fresh honey, and the fishermen unpack their nets while humming half-forgotten songs under their breath. But there's something unspoken threading through it all, a quiet weight pressing at the back of your thoughts. Because everyone's talking about last night. You overhear a vendor whispering to a neighbor, swearing the sanctuary lamps burned without oil, their flames moving like breath instead of fire. Another claims a priest woke covered in fig sap, though he hadn't left his mat. A small boy nearby sells almond braids tied with reed fibers. To keep her out of your head, he says solemnly, then adds, or let her in, if that's what you want. He doesn't specify which choice is safer. You make your way back toward the sanctuary, memory stone warm in your palm. The courtyard feels different, in daylight less sacred, almost ordinary. The fig tree's leaves cast neat shadows over the cracked tiles. And the altar holds the remnants of last night's offerings, hardened honey, overturned bowls, figs reduced to seeds and skin. No priests sing, no hymns rise. Even the pool looks shallow, as though it belongs to another place entirely. The elderly woman is here, as always, leaning against her staff in the dappled shade. She watches you approach, her expression unreadable, but softer today than before. You followed her, she says simply, voice low enough that the cicadas almost drown it out. You start to answer, but she raises a hand. Don't explain, she murmurs. You won't have the words for it yet. Instead, She gestures to a small clay tablet resting against the altar. Its surface is etched with spirals familiar ones. Like the grooves in your memory stone, but these are layered, overlapping in ways that make your eyes ache if you look too long. She taught us this, the woman says. Hypnea, the first pattern for calling dreams back when they wander. You trace the symbols lightly with your fingertips, their grooves shallow and uneven, carved by hand long ago. Most people think the spiral means sleep, she adds, leaning on her staff. But that's not it. It's not about rest. It's about returning. Somewhere, nearby, a priest coughs softly, breaking the silence. He's kneeling at the pool, pouring saffron threads into the water one by one, murmuring under his breath. You can't catch the words, but the cadence feels familiar now. The same rhythm the hymns used to thread waking into dreaming. Historians still debate whether Hypnea was ever considered a goddess or simply a local spirit tied to this sanctuary. But here, under the fig tree's shadow, watching saffron dissolve into water like slow-moving light, it hardly feels like a useful distinction. The boy with silvery eyes is absent today, though you catch yourself glancing at the far corner of the courtyard where he usually sits. His empty bowl balanced carefully on his knees. The absence feels heavier than you'd like to admit. Before you leave, the elderly woman stops you with a hand on your arm. She's nearer now, she says quietly. The boundary thins a little more each night. If you hear the lyre before the lamps are lit, don't follow it. You ask what happens if you do. Her answer is unsettlingly gentle. You probably won't make it back. By nightfall, the city exhales. The air cools slightly, carrying with it the scent of olive wood burning somewhere distant. Across the rooftops, soft lamplight drifts through narrow alleys, flickering as though caught in its own private wind. You lie on your reed mat, watching shadows slip across the ceiling. The memory stone rests in your palm, its surface warmer tonight, almost fevered, as though it carries its own quiet heartbeat. And then you hear it, the lyre. Its notes are careful this time, unhurried, drifting somewhere between lullaby and summons. You hesitate, remembering the woman's warning, but curiosity tugs harder than caution ever could. So you rise and follow the sound into the quiet streets, careful with each step. The music leads you past the fountain where children used to fold fig leaves into boats, though tonight the water sits still and untouched. Past the olive press where the air usually smells faintly of crushed fruit, but now holds nothing but cool stone. Past the shuttered taverna where men used to play dice, silent tonight as if abandoned. Finally, the sound carries you back to the sanctuary courtyard. The lamps are already lit. The pool glows faintly, reflecting more stars than the sky seems to hold above you. Spirals of saffron float lazily beneath its surface, circling endlessly without sinking. The air smells of honey again, stronger this time, almost dizzying in its sweetness. The boy sits at the pool's edge, empty bowl balanced between his hands. He doesn't look up when you arrive, only gestures for you to sit beside him. You weren't supposed to follow, he says softly, though there's no anger in his voice, only something like resignation. You ask him where the music comes from. She plays it, he answers simply, when she wants you close. And then he looks at you for the first time, his silvery eyes reflecting the lamplight strangely, like liquid metal. She's going to ask you something tonight. Before you can ask what, the hymn begins. It's slower than before, almost hesitant, as though the priests are listening more than they're singing. The fig leaves overhead tremble in a breeze you can't feel, and shadows bend strangely along the cracked tiles beneath you. This time, you don't close your eyes. The pool stirs without touch, its spirals dissolving into patterns you can't name. And then Hypnia is there veiled, silent, standing just at the water's edge. Her presence is quiet, but vast, pulling sound and thought into itself until the rest of the courtyard fades away. You expect her to speak. She doesn't. Instead, she extends her hand slowly, palm open, offering something so faint you can't quite see it, just a suggestion of shape and light, shifting between fingers. You glance at the boy, but his expression gives nothing away. "Take it," he says quietly. The air around you hums faintly, like the moment just before lightning touches ground. Your hand trembles slightly as you reach forward, and when your fingers close over hers, the world tilts. Light spilling in threads, sound stretching thin, the ground beneath you falling away entirely, and then, without warning, you're standing somewhere else. A shoreline beneath an indigo sky, waves crawling backward into the sea. And Hypnia beside you now, closer than she's ever been. She whispers something you can't yet understand. But you feel it settle deep inside you, like a tide pulling outward. When you blink, you're back in the courtyard, knees pressed to stone, breath shallow and quick. The boy watches you carefully. "She's given you the first piece," he says. You look down at your palm, and there, pressed into your skin, is the faint spiral of honey and fig sap, glowing softly beneath the lamplight. The mark doesn't wash off. You try the next morning, dipping your palm into a clay bowl of cool water, rubbing at the faint spiral of honey and fig sap until your skin turns red. But the glow lingers beneath the surface, subtle and patient, like light trapped under river glass. The marketplace hums faintly beyond your door, but it feels distant today, muffled somehow, as though you've stepped slightly outside of its rhythm. The voices of traders and fishermen sound layered, each sentence carrying an echo you can't quite follow. When you pass the old man selling almonds near the fountain, he watches you too long before saying anything. Finally, he leans forward, squinting. "You've been marked," he murmurs softly, and then glances quickly over his shoulder, as though someone might overhear. You ask him what it means. He hands you a single almond, wrapped in fig leaf, and says, "Keep this by your bed tonight. You'll see why." You ask him why almonds, and he smiles faintly, lowering his voice further. She favors their bitterness. Says it reminds her that dreams aren't supposed to be sweet. There's no further explanation, and you don't ask for one. As you continue through the city, you notice others watching you too, the priest carrying bundles of reed mats, the child folding fig leaves into tiny boats, even the taverna keeper sweeping olive pits from his doorstep. They glance toward your marked hand and then look away, quickly, as though it's something private. By midday, you return to the sanctuary. The courtyard feels quieter than before, but not empty. You hear soft scraping, somewhere like stone against clay, and follow the sound beneath the fig tree. There, seated cross-legged on the ground, is the boy with silvery eyes. He's carving spirals into small clay discs, dozens of them, each one slightly different from the last. When he notices you, he doesn't look surprised. "You touched her," he says simply. You nod, and he studies your palm with unblinking focus, tilting his head like someone reading an unfamiliar script. "She gave you the first piece," he murmurs, repeating what he said last night. "It'll call the others to you." You ask him what the others are, but he doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he presses a small clay disc into your free hand, the spiral etched into it rough and uneven, still damp from the carving tool. "They used to leave these beneath their pillows," he says quietly. "A way of remembering what they didn't want to lose." You ask if it works. Sometimes he replies, "But it can also show you things you don't want to find." That evening, as the sun dips lower and saffron light spills over the rooftops, you notice something odd. The lamps in the sanctuary courtyard light themselves before anyone touches them. One by one, their flames bloom quietly, steady and still, as if acknowledging your arrival. The boy doesn't speak again, but as you turn to leave, he calls out softly without looking up, "Don't dream near the pool tonight." She listens more closely there. The night comes heavy, carrying a quiet you can almost hear. You lie on your reed mat, the almond wrapped in fig leaf resting near your pillow, the damp clay disc balanced carefully against your chest. Outside, cicadas sing slower tonight, their rhythm uneven, as though some of them have forgotten the next note. The memory stone warms faintly in your hand, pulsing now and then in a way you can feel more than see. Sleep creeps close, and you let it. You open your eyes inside the dream and find yourself somewhere unexpected, not the shoreline, not the courtyard, but a narrow passage lined with broken amphorae. Clay shards scatter across the floor, sharp beneath your bare feet, and faint salt air drifts from somewhere ahead. You follow the sound of dripping water deeper into the passage. Fingertips brushing damp walls carved with spirals so ancient they're almost erased. Then you hear it. The lyre. Not the soft lullaby it played before, but a single, low note, held long enough to blur into silence, vibrating faintly through the stones beneath your feet. When you reach the end of the passage, the space opens into a hidden chamber round, domed. Its ceiling painted with stars that glow faintly in the dark. In the center lies a stone pool, smaller than the sanctuaries, but deeper, its water impossibly still. And standing at its edge is Hypnea. This time, she's unmasked. Her face is pale, framed by fig leaves woven into her dark hair. Her expression unreadable but strangely human, neither gentle nor cruel. She holds no lyre, yet its sound continues, spilling softly from somewhere unseen. "Do you know what you carry?" she asks, her voice so quiet it feels like thought more than sound. You open your palm, instinctively, revealing the faint spiral glowing beneath your skin. "That," she says, "is a key." A ripple stirs the pool, and within it, you see fragments of other people's dreams. A fisherwoman's net heavy with silver scales. A temple filled with overturned lamps, a child releasing an almond, boat into black water. "They leave them here," she whispers, "all the pieces they can't hold on to. The fragments too heavy for waking." You ask her why you were given one. Her gaze shifts toward the reflection in the pool, watching something you can't see. "Because you've forgotten more than most," she says softly. The silence stretches, filled only by the faint hum of that single lyre, notes still suspended in the air. Then she kneels, dipping her fingertips into the water, and holds them out to you. Droplets cling to her skin like glass beads, reflecting the chamber's faint painted stars. "Take one," she says. You hesitate, remembering the boy's warning, but her expression doesn't waver. So you reach forward, and touch her hand lightly, letting a single droplet fall onto your marked palm. The chamber tilts immediately, light folding in strange directions. The painted stars above you spiraling into motion until you can't tell which way is down. And then, you're standing in the sanctuary courtyard again, the fig tree rustling overhead, the lamps guttering low. The boy is there, seated at the pool's edge, watching you carefully. You shouldn't have taken it, he says quietly. You ask him why. Because now, he whispers, she can find you even when you're awake. Morning blinks open slowly, as if the city itself doesn't entirely want to be here. The sky carries a washed-out kind of light, thin and milky, and the air feels damp, with the scent of crushed fig leaves warming under the sun. People move like they're caught between two worlds today, half present, half still somewhere else. You notice it everywhere. The baker stares too long at his kneading bowl before realizing he hasn't added any flour. A fisherman ties and unties the same not 3 times before giving up entirely. And 2 priests argue over a ritual scroll, only to discover they've been holding opposite ends of the same page. It isn't just them, though. You feel it too. Every step carries a quiet weight now, like something presses just behind your thoughts. The faint spiral glowing beneath your skin pulses gently, reminding you of the droplet you took last night, the one hypnia offered in silence, the one you probably weren't supposed to accept. By midday, you wander toward the sanctuary, searching for something you can't name. The fig tree casts its usual shade, but today its branches bend slightly lower, heavy with fruit that wasn't there yesterday. Bees circle lazily in the warm air, their low hum almost matching the quiet rhythm pulsing in your palm. The boy sits at the pool's edge again, balancing one of his clay discs on his knee. He doesn't look up as you approach, just turns the disc over and over like he's testing its weight. She knows now, he says softly. You ask who. He glances at your hand, then back at the pool, all of them. You crouch beside him, trying to follow his gaze. The pool's water is still, almost mirror-like. But beneath its surface you catch glimpses of strange shapes moving slowly spirals. Fig leaves, fragments of faces you don't recognize. She's calling the others, the boy continues, tracing a small circle on the damp clay with his fingertip. The ones who still carry pieces like yours. You'll start seeing them soon. The phrase sounds simple, but something in his tone unsettles you, as if on cue, someone clears their throat behind you. You turn to find a woman standing near the altar, her hair bound in a loose braid, her expression unreadable. She carries a small woven basket filled with almonds wrapped in fig leaves, their pale shapes carefully arranged like offerings. She holds your gaze too long before speaking. Eat one tonight, she says quietly, and you'll dream the same place twice. You ask her who she is, but she only smiles faintly, setting the basket near the pool before disappearing into the shadows beneath the colonnade. The boy sighs, shaking his head. You're in the middle now, he says. People start appearing when you're in the middle. Before you leave, you notice something else. The spirals etched around the sanctuary's edge seem sharper today, as if freshly carved. You swear one of them wasn't there yesterday, a spiral that folds inward twice before ending abruptly, almost like it's unfinished. Historians still debate whether spirals in ancient Greek sanctuaries were decorative, ritualistic, or mnemonic tools meant to aid dreaming. But standing here, palm glowing faintly beneath the fig tree's shade, you're beginning to suspect none of those explanations are enough. You leave the sanctuary slowly, carrying a single almond in your pocket, unsure whether you'll eat it tonight. Night falls heavier than usual, pulling silence into the streets like a long, low tide. The lamps in the courtyard light themselves again, one by one, without the priest's touch. The shadows they cast crawl oddly tonight, bending away from the walls instead of toward them, as though something brighter sits just behind the stone. You lie on your reed mat, almond resting near your pillow, clay disc beside your hand, memory stone warm against your palm. The air feels thicker, carrying the faint sweetness of figs even though none are near. Sleep comes fast, but this time it feels deliberate, as though something waits for you on the other side. When your eyes open, inside the dream, you re-standing in a place you haven't seen before, a vast open plain beneath a violet sky. The air humming faintly like distant bees. Strange stone markers rise from the ground around you, each one carved with spirals in different sizes and directions, overlapping like ripples on a pond. Ahead, you see figures moving slowly between the stones. As you step closer, you realize they're people, but not quite. Their outlines shimmer faintly like heat rising from rock, and their faces blur the longer you look at them. Some carry small objects in their hands, fragments of clay discs, pieces of fig wood, droplets of light cupped carefully as though they might spill. The lyre plays somewhere unseen, soft and patient, each note falling into the earth like rain. And then Hypnia appears again, walking barefoot across the plain toward you. Her veil hangs loose tonight, revealing the dark fig leaves braided into her hair. Though her expression remains as unreadable as ever, "You've stepped too far," she says quietly. You ask her what this place is. Her gaze moves to the spirals carved into the markers. "This," she murmurs, "is where the pieces rest when they're not being carried." She gestures lightly, and one of the shimmering figures pauses, turning toward you. It opens its hand, revealing a faintly glowing spiral almost identical to the one marked on your palm. "They've been gathering," she continues, "all of them. You can't hold just one forever." You ask what happens when the pieces come together. For the first time, she hesitates. "Even I don't know," she says softly. "Some say it's where dreams end. Others say it's where waking begins." A ripple moves through the plain, the humming deepening like something shifting beneath the earth. The shimmering figures scatter slightly, adjusting their paths between the stones, carrying their pieces more tightly now. Hypnia looks at you again, her silvery gaze strangely sharp in the violet light. "Don't come here again," she whispers. "Not until you're called." Before you can respond, the clay disc in your hand cracks sharply, splintering into two perfect halves. The dream folds inward instantly, the ground beneath you sliding away like sand, and the sound of the lyre dissolves into silence. You wake with a start, sitting upright on your mat, breath unsteady. The almond is gone. In its place, resting on the mat where you left it, lies a fresh fig, leaf its edges damp, as though plucked only moments ago. Morning comes reluctantly, as if the sun itself debated whether to rise. The city feels quieter today, but not peaceful, more like everyone has been let in on a secret they aren't ready to discuss. You notice it in the marketplace, where vendors speak softer than usual, and in the harbour, where the sailors tie their moorings twice, even when once would do. and you notice it in yourself. The fig leaf still lies on your mat, edges faintly damp. Its green veins pulsing faintly as though it's been cut from something still alive. You slip it carefully into your pouch without really knowing why. When you step into the streets, the air is heavy with heat. Fig pollen drifts faintly near the sanctuary walls, curling like smoke before settling onto the ground. Someone nearby laughs softly, though you can't see who, and the sound fades as quickly as it begins. You make your way to the sanctuary, but before you enter, you pause at the courtyard's edge. Something's different. The pool isn't still today. Its surface ripples without wind. The faint spirals of water pulling toward the center, like it's breathing beneath the surface. The lamps lining the courtyard burn lower than usual, their flames bending inward, as if drawn toward the pool itself. The boy sits cross-legged beneath the fig tree, his clay discs scattered around him like fallen leaves. For once, he doesn't look at you right away. He's staring into the water, lips moving silently, as though counting something only he can see. You ask him if something's wrong. "She's changing it," he says without looking up. You ask who. "The pool," he clarifies after a pause. "She's making it deeper." The boy finally looks at you, his silvery eyes reflecting faint fragments of lamplight. "They're gathering closer," he says, nodding slightly toward the spiraling ripples. "The ones who still carry the pieces." You glance at the surface again and realize. You can see faint outlines moving within the water figures blurred by the distortion, walking slowly beneath the surface as though they're not drowning but dreaming. "Tonight," the boy says, finally holding your gaze, "you'll see them." You ask how he knows. He points at the pouch on your hip. "She gave you the leaf," he says simply, as though that explains everything. Historians still debate whether fig leaves in Greek rituals symbolized fertility, knowledge, or concealment. Standing here, feeling the weight of the leaf in your pouch, you suspect all three explanations might be wrong. Before leaving, you notice a fresh carving etched into the sanctuary wall beside the pool, a spiral within a spiral, its edges sharp and unfinished, still shedding tiny curls of stone dust. It looks like it was carved only moments ago. The night opens slowly, heavy and patient, as though waiting for you to fall into it. You lie on your reed mat, the fig leaf resting near your pillow this time, its edges curling slightly as though reacting to the air. Outside, the cicadas fall silent earlier than usual, their rhythms breaking off mid-song. The lamps beyond your door flicker once, twice, then steady themselves into a low, unshifting glow. When sleep comes, it arrives like water pulling you under without resistance. You wake standing at the sanctuary pool, except this isn't the sanctuary. The pool is wider here, its surface vast and dark, stretching beneath an endless sky where no stars move. The spirals on the stone edge are deeper, sharper, glowing faintly as though carved into something still alive. And there are others here. Dozens of them, standing at the water's edge, each holding something different, broken clay discs, fragments of fig bark, small droplets cupped in trembling hands. None of them speak, but their silence feels coordinated, like a ritual you've stumbled into halfway through. Across the pool, you see Hypnea. She stands barefoot on a thin strip of stone, her veil discarded entirely now. Fig leaves woven into her hair, in deliberate patterns, 3 spirals on the left, 2 on the right. Her gaze doesn't meet yours immediately. She's watching the figures nearest her, who one by one kneel and lower their objects into the water. The pool swallows each offering silently. When it's your turn, you realize you're holding the fig leaf. You don't remember deciding to bring it, but it rests gently in your palm, warm against your skin, the veins faintly glowing like threads of firefly light. You step closer to the water. Before you release it, Hypnea finally speaks. Once it touches, you won't belong only to yourself anymore. You pause, looking at her. She tilts her head slightly, expression soft but unreadable. They'll see you, she says quietly, the ones who haven't chosen yet. You let the leaf fall. The surface ripples once, then stills completely, swallowing its glow without sound, and then everything changes. The spirals carved into the stone edge flare faintly. Patterns connecting across the pool like threads pulled taut beneath the surface. One by one, the silent figures around you fade slightly, their shapes becoming transparent, outlines dissolving as though they're stepping out of the dream entirely. You're left standing there, alone, with Hypnea watching you. You'll start remembering soon, she says softly. You ask her what you're supposed to remember. Why you came here, she whispers. The lyre begins to play again, somewhere unseen, a low, steady rhythm pulsing in time with your marked palm. You wake to the sound still lingering in your ears, faint and deliberate. This time, the fig leaf is gone. In its place rests a small spiral carved from stonecool, smooth, and glowing faintly as though it remembers something you haven't learned yet. Dawn comes with a strange kind of silence, the kind that feels as though the entire city has paused mid-breath. You wake on your mat, the spiral stone resting in your palm. Its weight is small, but it feels impossibly heavy, as though it carries something older than stone should. You turn it over, tracing the ridges carved into its surface. The spiral winds inward 3 times, then abruptly stops, ending in a flat, unfinished edge. You slip the stone into your pouch, though you're starting to suspect the pouch isn't really yours anymore. The streets are oddly empty when you step outside, except for one old man sweeping fig leaves into piles that scatter again each time the wind shifts. He doesn't seem frustrated, though. If anything, he seems resigned, like he's been doing this for years without expecting progress. At the sanctuary, the air hangs heavy with heat and something else you can't name. The pool is still again, but this time the surface is darker, almost mirror-like, reflecting the spirals carved around it. You notice the carvings have deepened overnight, edges sharper than before. Their patterns now connecting into something larger-like, fragments of a map you don't yet know how to read. The boy isn't beneath the fig tree today. Instead, he sits on the pool's edge, one clay disc balanced perfectly on his knee. His gaze is fixed on the water, but he doesn't seem to see it. You've started, he says without turning his head. You ask what he means. The remembering, he replies softly. It'll come in pieces. You won't like all of them. He finally looks at you then, his silvery eyes reflecting fragments of lamplight. You should find the others, he says. They've been walking past you for days now. You ask how you'll know them. He nods at your pouch. They'll carry something like yours. As you leave the sanctuary, you start watching faces in the street more carefully. Most glance past you without pause, but here and there you notice small details. A young woman with a clay disc tied to her belt. An old sailor turning a spiral stone over, in his hand a boy humming softly beneath his breath as he draws circles in the dust with his toe, pieces everywhere. Historians still debate whether spiral motifs in early Greek sanctuaries represented personal identity, cycles of time, or pathways into altered states. Here, surrounded by strangers carrying their own fragments, you're beginning to suspect the answer is yes. You head home, turning the stone over in your palm until its unfinished edge starts to feel less incomplete and more like an invitation. That night, the dream arrives before you sleep. You're sitting on your mat, tracing the spiral with your fingertip, when the lamplight flickers once and steadies. The sound of the lyre begins faintly outside your door, low and deliberate, as though plucked by someone sitting directly beneath your window. You blink once, and you're standing at the pool again. But this isn't the sanctuary's pool. It's wider, darker, edged by spirals that seem to shift subtly each time you look at them. The air smells faintly of crushed fig leaves, damp stone, and something metallic you can't name. Around the pool, a dozen figures stand silently, each holding an object, a disc, a leaf, a fragment of stone glowing faintly in their palms. None of them speak, but the silence feels layered, like words have already been said and repeated here countless times before. Hypnia stands barefoot before you under a fig-wood arch. Her hair flows freely tonight, dark waves with hints of silver. You found them, she whispers, even though you never mentioned it. You glance at the figures around the pool. They've always been around, she adds. A lot of them still haven't figured it out. She gestures toward the water. The surface ripples faintly, though there's no wind, and beneath it you see shapes moving slowly, spirals of light. Fragments of symbols, shards of faces that blur when you try to focus on them. You've been holding onto this for longer than you think, Hypnia says, her eyes locked on your pouch. You take out the spiral stone, holding it up carefully. The figures around the pool lean forward slightly, as though recognizing something. The edge isn't gone, Hypnia says, nodding at the spiral. It's just waiting. You ask, waiting for what? For the next mark, she softly says. The lyre's rhythm deepens, and the spirals carved around the pool begin to glow faintly, connecting like threads of light across the stone. The figures step forward one by one, lowering their objects into the water. Each disappears silently, sinking without a ripple. You hesitate when it's your turn, but Hypnia gives a nod. You lower the stone into the pool. The surface accepts it without sound, and instantly, your marked palm burns faintly, not painfully, just enough to remind you something has shifted. The spirals carved into the stone edge brighten for a moment, then fade. The lyre stops playing mid-note, leaving a silence so deep you can hear your own breath. Look up, and Hypnia has vanished. You're standing alone beside the dark pool, your reflection faint and unsteady in the still water. And just before the dream dissolves, you hear a voice not Hypnia's, not the boy's, but someone else's, low and deliberate, almost amused. You're late. You wake with the sound still lingering in your ears, your pouch heavier than before. Inside, the spiral stone has changed. Its edge isn't unfinished anymore. It spirals inward for times now. Morning filters through your shutters in thin, uneven strands of light. The city is waking, but sluggishly as, though everyone overslept and isn't ready to admit it yet. You sit up, slowly, the spiral stone clutched in your palm. Its surface feels warmer than before, almost alive, as though it's been storing something while you slept. You turn it over, tracing the fourth spiral. The grooves are deeper now, smoother, almost polished, as if hundreds of hands have already held it. Outside, the marketplace hums faintly, but the usual sounds shouted bargains, clattering amphory. Fishmongers, insisting theirs are the freshest, seem muffled, like you're hearing them through water. You step into the street anyway, the pouch hanging heavier at your hip. Something's changed in the city. People move differently now, slower, a little more deliberate, as if they're expecting something to happen and don't want to startle it. You pass a baker stacking loaves, his hands dusted white, and notice a small spiral scratched faintly into the wooden counter behind him. The same mark shows up again, 2 streets later, carved into the side of a stone pillar, small, rough, but unmistakable. And again, scratched into the underside of a clay jug on a vendor's cart. You start counting without meaning to. By the time you reach the harbor, you've stopped at 7. The harbor itself is strangely quiet. Normally, it's chaos here, ropes snapping taut, gulls screaming, sailors shouting, but today the waves lap gently against the docks. And most of the ships are anchored, their sails drawn tight like folded wings. That's when you see them. 3 figures standing at the far end of the pier, barefoot on the sun-warmed planks. Each holds something different, a clay disc, a fig leaf, and a spiral stone so faintly luminous you can see it even from here. You hesitate, but one of them, the tallest, wrapped in a pale linen cloak, turns their head slightly, like they've been waiting for you. When you approach, the tallest figure speaks without greeting. You've marked it. You glance at your pouch instinctively. It's changed, you admit. Good, the figure says, as if this was expected. Then you can open it now. You ask what they mean, but the figure simply gestures toward the water. The first entrance, they say softly, is always hidden. You follow their gaze and notice something strange. Beneath the pier, where the water should be deepest, a faint spiral of light rotates slowly under the surface. The reflection stretches outward with every small wave, but the center remains fixed, unmoving, steady. Before you can ask what you're supposed to do, the figure presses something into your hand, a thin strip of carved fig bark, etched with markings you don't recognize. You'll know when they whisper. And then they're gone, stepping lightly into the crowd without sound, as if they were never there. You stand at the edge of the pier, the spiral spinning faintly beneath the water. Historians still debate whether ancient Greek harbors used secret navigational symbols, carved into nearby structures to mark safe passages. Standing here, staring at the silent spiral below, you suspect the water remembers things long after the people forget. That night, the sound of the lyre returns. You wake not from sleep, but from stillness. Lying on your mat, with the spiral stone resting against your palm, its edges glowing faintly in the dark. The carved strip of fig bark lies beside it, warm despite the cool air, the etched markings pulsing faintly like breath. You sit up slowly, listening. The lyre isn't outside this time, it's below you, as though someone is playing beneath the ground. The notes are soft but insistent, their rhythm spiraling downward rather than outward, pulling rather than guiding. You step outside into the silent street. The city sleeps, but its lamps burn steadily. Halos of faint light gathering against walls etched faintly with spirals you hadn't noticed before. The marks are everywhere now, carved shallowly into doorframes, amphorae, and even the bases of fig trees. And though you hear no footsteps, you sense others moving through the streets with you shadows crossing thresholds, lingering near doorways, pausing briefly at corners before slipping out of sight. The lyre grows louder as you approach the sanctuary. When you enter, the boy is waiting by the pool. Cross-legged, beneath the fig tree, discs scattered around him like a constellation rearranged nightly. His silvery eyes meet yours immediately, reflecting the faint spiral patterns flickering on the pool's surface. "You found one," he says softly, nodding toward the fig bark strip in your hand. You ask him what it means. He tilts his head slightly, as if listening to something you can't hear. "Not here," he whispers, "below." He gestures toward the far end of the sanctuary, where a small archway curls downward into darkness. You've passed it before without thinking it looked like storage, but now the air around it hums faintly. The same rhythm as the lyre. Carrying the bark strip and spiral stone, you step beneath the archway. The passage narrows quickly, walls pressing closer until you're walking single file behind the boy. The air smells damp, rich with earth and fig pollen, and somewhere ahead, water drips steadily, echoing softly. When the tunnel opens, it reveals a chamber lit by lamps you don't recognize, their flames pale blue instead of gold. The walls are covered with spirals, hundreds of them. Carved deep into the stone, their grooves filled with crushed fig bark that faintly glows in the shifting light. In the center lies a shallow basin of water, perfectly still, reflecting the spirals above like a mirror fractured into infinite pieces. "This is where they wait," the boy says softly, sitting cross-legged at the basin's edge. You ask who they are. He glances at your marked palm and then at the strip of bark in your hand. "You'll hear them when you touch it," he whispers. Before you can reply, the lyre fades completely, leaving a silence so deep it vibrates against your skin. You kneel, lowering the bark strip toward the basin. And as it touches the surface, the spirals on the walls ignite, faintly one after another, like distant constellations remembering themselves. Something stirs beneath the water. Not movement exactly, more like recognition. And just before the chamber dissolves around you, you hear the same voice you heard in the last dream come, amused, inevitable, finally. You wake on your mat, the fig bark strip damp in your hand. The spiral stone now hums faintly when you hold it to your ear. It's the same rhythm as the lyre. You wake before dawn, the air heavy and still, as though the city is holding its breath again. The spiral stone rests beside you, pulsing faintly like a slow heartbeat. You pick it up, and for the first time, the hum isn't just sound, it's layered, like overlapping notes from 3 different instruments playing at once. You try tilting it in the dim light, and the stone catches a faint glimmer from somewhere inside itself, as though there's a memory trapped within. The fig bark strip lies nearby, brittle and soft at once, the carved markings faintly glowing in sync with the stone. When you press your thumb against the bark, you feel an almost imperceptible warmth, like sunlight diffused through leaves. Outside, the city is quiet, but the quiet feels wrong. No gulls over the harbor, no clatter from the baker's courtyard. Even the breeze has stilled, caught somewhere between waiting and withholding. You walk toward the sanctuary without meaning to. The streets are emptier than they've ever been. Those you do pass move slowly, deliberately carrying strange objects in their hands. A woman clutching a handful of crushed fig leaves a child balancing a tiny clay disc on his palm, an old sailor. Tracing spirals into the dust with his fingertip as he mutters under his breath. They don't look at you, but you notice the faintest shimmer on their skin like a thin sheen of dew where no moisture should be. When you reach the sanctuary, the boy isn't there this time. The pool lies dark and glassy, reflecting the spirals carved along the stone walls. But the water feels heavier, somehow, as though the weight of it has increased overnight. Hypnia stands on the far side, barefoot again, her damp hair loose and sticking to her temples like she just came up from the water.l. She's got a little clay disc in one hand, spinning it gently between her fingers, and she doesn't even glance up when you get close. They're walking now, she whispers, almost as if talking to the disc. You ask her who she's talking about. She locks eyes with you, her tired silvery gaze steady. All of them, she whispers softly. Those who carried the pieces unknowingly are starting to awaken. You look at your pouch, but she just shakes her head. It's not just you, she says. There are tons. She strolls to the pool's edge and gently drops the disc in. It sinks quietly, creating no ripple. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, slowly, the spirals carved into the sanctuary walls begin to glow faintly, one after another, connecting into larger patterns. The shapes form briefly, shifting between map, constellation, and something less nameable, before dissolving back into faint light. Hypnia watches the patterns disappear, her face a mystery. You've checked out the harbor spiral, she says, still looking away. You nod. It's just one of 7, she says. You'll find the next one under the fig tree. She says it so casually, like she's just telling you where to grab some bread, but when you ask why, she just shrugs. It's just waiting for you. You don't ask how she knows. The fig grove lies beyond the eastern edge of the city, past the market, and the narrow alleys where amphories stack precariously like mismatched towers. By mid-morning, the sun rests high and heat gathers low, pooling in the cracks between stones until the air itself wavers faintly. You pass a potter's workshop where rows of drying amphorae are etched faintly with spirals, though you're almost certain they weren't there 2 days ago. Near the grove, the city sounds fade behind you, the shouts, the gulls, even the hum of the harbor wind. The ground here softens underfoot, fig leaves cushioning the steps, their pale undersides flashing like scattered fragments of light when stirred by the faintest breeze. The grove smells sweet and damp, as though the air has been steeped in fruit and earth for years. You follow the worn path until it splits into 3 smaller trails, each marked by a low stone carved faintly with you guessed it spirals. But one spiral differs slightly. Its outer curve is incomplete, ending abruptly like your stone once did. You take that path. The canopy thickens quickly, filtering sunlight into shifting patterns of green and gold. Birds chatter faintly above, though their calls are muffled, as though heard from beneath water. The further you walk, the quieter the world becomes, until you can hear your own breath and the distant hum of insects threading through the warm air. That's when you see it. The spiral pool, smaller than the sanctuary's basin. This one lies hidden beneath a ring of fig trees whose roots knot tightly into the earth, forming a natural boundary around the water. Its surface is perfectly still, except for the faintest rotating shimmer At its center, the same spiral you saw beneath the harbor pier, only smaller, closer, sharper. Someone is sitting at the pool's edge. You almost turn back when they speak without looking at you. You're late. It's the same voice you've heard twice before in the dreams, beneath the water, layered with quiet amusement. The figure finally turns, revealing a face you don't recognize but somehow expected, pale, drawn, shadowed beneath the eyes as though sleep hasn't found them in weeks. They hold a spiral stone identical to yours, except theirs carries 5 rings instead of 4. You've opened yours, they say softly, glancing at the pouch on your hip. You nod. Then you're ready, they murmur, lowering their stone into the pool. As it touches the surface, faint light spreads outward, spiraling across the water and sinking into the roots of the surrounding fig trees. The air shifts instantly, warm wind stirring the leaves above like soft applause. This one's deeper, they whisper, standing and louder. You kneel at the water's edge, the fig bark strip warm in your hand. When you lower it toward the pool, the markings flare once, bright as firefly light, and then fade completely. The water responds rippling, inward instead of outward, folding back on itself until it forms a slow-turning vortex at the center. You lean closer, instinctively, and for a moment, you hear it, a layered chorus of whispers beneath the surface. Not words exactly, but rhythms spiraling patterns of sound, threaded into meaning you can almost grasp before it slips away again. You close your eyes, and the whispers align faintly with the hum of your stone. The same rhythm, the same pull, weaving through every fragment you've carried so far. And then the voice returns, clearer this time, closer than before. 6 remain. When you open your eyes, the pool is still again. The stranger is gone, but your stone now carries 5 rings, and you feel it humming in your bones. The city feels different when you return. It isn't the streets themselves there, the same uneven stones, the same crooked clay roof spot. The air carries a quiet weight, like everyone has started whispering without realizing it. You notice it first near the market. Vendors arrange their figs and amphorae, as always, but the conversations feel thinner, stitched together by glances rather than words. One woman pauses, mid-sail, to trace a spiral into the condensation on her wine jug. A child pulls at his father's sleeve, holding a smooth clay disc like a secret he doesn't want to share. You stop at the baker's stall out of habit. He recognizes you instantly, but says nothing, just nods at the spiral carved faintly into the counter. It's been deepened since you last passed through, etched deliberately this time, almost proud. By now, you've stopped pretending not to notice. You ask if he knows what the marks mean. He shrugs without looking up from the loaf he's cutting, then mutters, "They're waking something, aren't they?" Before you can reply, a sudden gust of wind pushes through the market, rattling clay cups and scattering stray fig leaves across the stones. Everyone pauses instinctively, looking upward. The sky is clear, cloudless, steady, but the wind carries a sound beneath it. Almost too low to notice, a faint plucked note, like the single string of a lyre. You follow the sound automatically. It leads you away from the market, past the sanctuary, toward the southern edge of the city, where the stone paths give way to grass and fractured rock. The hum from your spiral stone deepens with each step, thrumming faintly in your palm like the memory of a heartbeat. Eventually, you reach an overlook. From here, You can see the Aegean stretching endlessly, sunlight scattered across its surface in shifting bands of silver and blue. Waves lap lazily against a distant shoreline, where a small island rests like a stone dropped perfectly in the middle of silence. And there it is again, the lyre note, not from the city, not from the sky, from the island. A faint spiral glimmers on the distant sand, almost invisible beneath the sunlight, but unmistakable to you now. Hypnea appears behind you without sound, barefoot as always. You're not supposed to see it yet, she murmurs, shielding her eyes against the glare. You ask her why. Because it doesn't like being seen, she says simply. She pulls something from the folds of her linen cloak, a small clay disc, etched with a spiral more intricate than any you've seen. Unlike the others, this one is fractured deliberately down the center, each half slightly misaligned, as though refusing to match itself. The next entrance, she says, holding it out, requires 2 carriers. You'll need to find the other before nightfall. You ask where to start, but she only smiles faintly and nods toward the harbor. Ask the ferryman, she says. He remembers more than most. Historians still debate whether small Aegean islands like this were used as ritual waypoints or secret gatherings for initiates. Staring at the spiral shimmering faintly across the sand, you suspect the sea has kept better records than anyone else. By the time you reach the harbor, the sun is beginning to fall lower, turning the sails of anchored ships into pale gold sheets. The ferryman sits on an overturned amphora, mending a rope net with deliberate slowness, his hands moving in rhythm with some tune you can't hear. You recognize him instantly, not by face but by motion. The same calm, unhurried way he ties knots. The same strange sense that he's already seen you arrive. When you ask about the island, he pauses only briefly before nodding, as if he's been expecting the question. Been watching the spiral, have you? He asks, his voice low, almost kind. You admit you have. He gestures toward a small skiff moored at the end of the dock. It won't take you there, he says softly, but it'll take you close enough. Before you step aboard, you ask if he's seen another carrier. He smiles faintly, tightening the last knot on his net. She came through this morning, he says. Didn't ask questions, didn't leave answers. You thank him, but he waves it off like he's been thanked too many times before. The skiff creaks softly under your weight as you step inside. The spiral stone hums louder now, vibrating faintly against your palm like a living thing. The crossing is silent except for the soft slap of waves against the hull. Midway to the island, the sound shifts subtly. The water deepens beneath you, growing darker, heavier, until you can no longer see the seafloor. A faint luminescence begins to glow beneath the surface, a spiraling path of pale green light curling toward the distant sand. That's when you see her, a lone figure standing knee-deep in the shallows ahead, holding a stone that glows faintly in her hand. Her hair is braided loosely, strands whipping across her face in the sea breeze. When she turns, her eyes reflect the spiraling light below like mirrors catching fire. You're late, she says, though her tone carries no impatience-only recognition. She steps closer, revealing her stone, identical to yours, except for one small detail. Where yours now carries 5 rings, hers carries 6. Together, she says softly, holding her stone above the water. You mirror her, instinctively, lowering your spiral toward the shallow glow. The moment the stones align, the sea responds. The luminescent path beneath the surface sharpens suddenly, twisting downward into a slow, deliberate whirlpool. The water churns without sound, folding into itself in impossible patterns as though obeying something older than tide or wind. She steps into the whirlpool without hesitation. You follow. The water closes above you, cool and heavy, but you don't struggle. The spiral stones remain warm in your hands, guiding you downward as the currents shift into perfect silence. For a brief, breathless moment, you see it. A vast chamber beneath the island, carved entirely from white stone. Spirals etched into every surface like ancient fingerprints preserved in time. And then, faintly, the lyre begins again, soft, slow, patient as the chamber floods with pale light. 5 remain, the voice whispers, just above hearing. You open your eyes to find yourself standing on the sand, the carrier beside you, the sun low and burning. The island spiral has vanished, but your stone now carries 6 rings. The island is quiet now, so quiet you can hear your own heartbeat, if you stand still long enough. The other carrier, her name is Selene, though she says it softly. Like she isn't used to speaking, it walks beside you toward the center of the island. The sand shifts beneath your feet, warm and smooth, each grain carrying the heat of a sun that feels more distant by the minute. You reach a small ridge where the ground dips suddenly, revealing what looks like an ancient amphitheater carved directly into the stone of the island itself. Spirals cover every surface on the seats, the steps, even the shadows they cast. In the center, a single obsidian disc rests inlaid into the floor, reflecting the fading light like a pool of still water. Selene kneels beside it without speaking, placing her stone at its center. You follow, resting yours opposite hers. The moment they touch, the spirals carved into the amphitheater walls begin to glow faintly, one by one, until the entire hollow is bathed in soft, shifting light. The hum returns not from your stone this time, but from beneath the earth itself, deep and steady like a sleeping heartbeat. Selene looks at you, her expression unreadable. They buried the 7th here, she says quietly, running her fingertips along the rim of the obsidian disc, but it's not sleeping anymore. You ask what she means, but she doesn't answer. Instead, she stands, brushing sand from her palms, and gestures toward the faint path leading further inland. You follow. The heart of the island feels older than the rest, as though the wind hasn't touched it in centuries. The air grows cooler beneath a canopy of olive and fig trees whose roots tangle thickly into the stone, forcing you to step carefully. Eventually, the path opens into a clearing where 7 stone columns stand arranged in a perfect spiral. Each one bears markings worn, nearly smooth by time. But you can still make out faint echoes of spirals layered within spirals, so small they're almost invisible. Selene steps between the columns and places her palm against the 7th, the tallest among them. The markings along its surface brighten faintly beneath her touch, and the ground beneath your feet hums in response. Then you hear it again, not the lyre this time. A different sound, deeper and slower, like water folding against itself somewhere far below. Selene looks over her shoulder, her voice steady but quiet. Do you hear it? You nod. She closes her eyes, and for a long moment neither of you speak. The sound deepens, threading through the stone, the soil, the roots, until it feels less like something you rehearing, and more like something the island itself is remembering. Hypnia's words return to you suddenly. It doesn't like being seen. You glance at Selene, but she doesn't open her eyes. Then the hum changes. It sharpens slightly, fracturing into layered tones, spiraling upward until the markings along all 7 columns begin to glow in unison. The light spreads along the ground, weaving patterns between your feet until you stand at the center of a shifting, living spiral. Your stone pulses hot in your hand, then cools instantly. When you glance down, you see it now carries 7 rings, perfectly complete, but there's something else. The obsidian disk behind you has begun to crack. The crack widens slowly, without sound, splitting the disk cleanly down its center until faint light spills upward like mist. It's not harsh, not blinding, just soft and steady, the color of moonlight, reflected on water. Selene takes a small step back, her expression unreadable, but you feel the pull immediately. Not a violent pull, not danger. Something quieter, older. The light rises in a slow spiral, curling into the air above the amphitheater like threads of woven breath. It doesn't feel like magic knot in the sharp, dramatic way you've read about in old epics. This feels different. It feels like memory. You hear Hypnia's voice before you see her. She's standing at the ridge, the sea breeze catching her damp hair, her bare feet dusted faintly with sand. She doesn't descend into the amphitheater. Doesn't move closer, she only watches, as though she knows this part belongs to someone else. Selene walks forward first, her stone cupped carefully in both hands. You follow, mirroring her movements without needing to speak. Together, you lower the stones into the spiral of light. The glow flares briefly, then softens, spreading outward across the amphitheater until the spirals carved into the walls shimmer faintly like wet ink beneath moonlight. The hum fades. The silence that follows feels different, not empty, but settled, as though the island has exhaled for the first time in centuries. Later, you sit at the edge of the amphitheater, your feet dangling above the sand. Selene rests beside you, quiet as ever, turning her stone over and over in her hand, as though testing its new weight. You realize then that the stone is no longer humming. For the first time since the harbor, your hands are steady. The sea below stretches wide and endless, the waves folding gently into one another with the rhythm of something older than time. You hear gulls again, faint and distant, as though the island has decided to return to the ordinary business of being an island. You lean back against the cool stone and close your eyes. The spirals are complete now. The hum has gone quiet. You breathe slowly, deeply, letting the sounds of the island settle into your chest, the soft hiss of waves against the rocks, the far-off call of gulls drifting lazily in the wind, the creak of fig branches shifting under their own weight. For a long moment, you let yourself forget the path, behind you the cracked discs, the whispered voices beneath the water, the endless carvings layered into stone. The air smells faintly of salt and fig leaves warmed by the fading sun. Somewhere, in the distance, the ferryman's skiff rocks gently in the tide, tethered by a single rope. Beyond it, the mainland waits, though it feels quieter now too, like the spirals have left their mark on more than just the stones. Selene is silent beside you, her head tilted back, eyes half closed, as though she's listening to something you can't yet hear. Maybe she is. Or maybe the silence itself is enough. The spirals rest. The stones are cool. And, for now, there is nothing left to follow. You exhale slowly, shoulders loosening, breath easing into rhythm with the tide. the wind curls softly across your skin, carrying the promise of another quiet night. You close your eyes, letting the story dissolve into the slow sway of the sea, until all that's left is the sound of water folding against itself, again and again, as though it has always known the ending.